The way I like to look at this is that there are essentially 5 basic steps to search for colleges. And if you follow these 5, it's no guarantee you're going to get into the college that you want. That's not the way it works. It's maybe not the way it ever worked. It's definitely not the way it works now with the number of people applying to schools. However, if you do these 5 steps, you put yourself or your child into a very good position to have more opportunities to get accepted to colleges. So years ago, if you knew you had a certain GPA, you knew you had a certain test score, it was a pretty high degree of certainty that you were going to be able to get into XYZ college. Now, I'm afraid that doesn't work, and so we have to change our approach. There's also things that we have to look out for in terms of application process post-lockdown, post-COVID. Things have changed, so we just have to be aware of that. But again, if we do these 5 things, you're going to have a more relaxed, stress-free process. You're going to know what it is that your child needs to do, you need to do as parents to support, and then it's at that point becomes, unfortunately, a bit of a lottery, right? Where you're lucky enough to get the lottery. But we want to be able to buy more lottery tickets, which improves our chances. So that's kind of what doing all these steps is really all about. All right. Oh, a quick question or a quick statement on questions. The way that I've got this set up here, right, I'm looking at the camera and I got a screen to see what's going on. And then over on the side, I have where my Google Meet is. And it's far enough away that I really can't see people with hands up. I'm not active in the chat because I'm working this all by myself. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to unmute. I'd love to see your face. That's always nice to know who's asking the question. But just stop and say, hey, Mike, I got a question. 36 years of teaching and 38 years of coaching, I can handle an interruption. And I'll tell you, I'll come back to that one, or I'll go, this would be a perfect time. So this is a workshop. This is not a one direction, me just spewing information. Don't be afraid to get the information that you're looking for. All right, so let's talk about the 5 steps on how to pick the perfect college. Step number 1 is that you have to learn the new rules. When you were of the age to go to college, there was a completely different set of rules. The rules will go through modifications every 5 or 10 years, and there'll be slight adjustments, but they're nothing too great. But now when we look back 20, 25 years, the process is very different. The demands are very different. The outcomes are very different. And you're going to hear me use that word a lot. I have for years called myself a college planner. The last couple of years, I've rebranded myself as a future planner. And the reason why is that when I was trying to help kids get into college, the goal was just to get them into college, and we didn't worry about the outcome. Well, all of a sudden, starting to see a lot of kids boomerang. That means kids that I, worked really hard with to get into the best college were coming back because it wasn't a good match. It wasn't a good fit. Then I saw kids that were going to these big name brand colleges, but then unfortunately really not doing anything with their major. Or perhaps that they went with a major and they're struggling to make ends meet because what they thought they were getting ended up being different. So I did a lot of research. That was the one positive of the pandemic. I got locked up in my room, so I had a lot of time to study, and I recognized that outcomes were really what I should be focusing in on. So again, I'm not a college planner. College planners are looking to get you into a college so that they can put on their webpage, I got 12 kids into Berkeley, I got 7 into Stanford. Who cares? All that should matter is I got these kids to graduate from these schools. I have these kids that have a positive or high ROI job after that. That's what's really critical. So 1, we're going to talk about new rules. 2, we're going to recognize that there's a lot of data out there, and we shouldn't decide a college based on data, but we can allow the data to influence a great deal. And that's something that you've just got to keep up with. And there are a lot of great tools now that help you out with that. 3rd thing is we need to find the fit. So we talk about the new rules. We talk about what colleges how we used to search, but now I've nuanced it a bit where we're going to allow data to influence the search process, and then when we're going to decide, we really want to find the fit that works best for the children. Talk about what to do on the campus visit. I actually have some resources for that as well. And then finally, the paradox of choice. Just because you have a lot of options doesn't mean that's a good thing. We want enough options. That's the Goldilocks principle, right? You don't want too few, you don't want too many, you want just the right amount. That right amount is different for everyone, but I've been able to work with some numbers, and I've done this for so many years. I think I have that worked out. All right, so those are the 5 rules that we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about applications, college applications, and essays at the very end as well. Before I proceed, is there a question that anyone's got that you're just dying to know? Want to make certain that I cover something not working correctly? Anything that you need, now would be a very good time. Okay. All right, let's go forward. So there are new rules that we have to understand when we're applying to colleges now post-COVID. And I need you to understand why the traditional methods no longer work, and I also need to make you aware of some ugly stats. So why traditional methods no longer work? Well, one of the reasons why is that in the old days, we talked about a reach, target, and safety school. We talked about these 3 topics. This is what college planners considered as important. And so a reach school was classified as the kids were really too smart and their GPA was too high and the major was impacted and test scores were too high. It would be a stretch for me to get in there, but oh boy, that'd be great if I could just weasel my way into that college. That's traditionally what's known as a reach college. The bottom of that is the safety school, the dreaded safety school. Well, I really didn't get into my reach or target schools, but I got into so-and-so school. It's pretty good for a safety school is the way that kids would say it. You're looking at maybe dropping $200,000 for a safety school? Doesn't sound quite right. So what ends up happening is we don't want to use this language. A reach school implies that you don't match. So when I talk about match, I talk about the incoming cohort. All those kids that enter as a freshman, what's their GPA? What are their test scores? I know not all schools use test scores, but that information is still there. And did they take AP and honors courses? Were they in the top 10, top third of their graduating class? There's a lot of data out there. Again, we'll let data influence us. But we want to match our cohort. In sports, it's great that you made varsity as a freshman, but it's not so good if you don't play. And when you're in practice, you feel like you're holding the team back, and it breaks your confidence, and you end up sometimes quitting the sport if you're one of those kids that just made it onto the squad, just made it into the school. That's not a really great concept for how we go about looking at a reach school. So I think that the concept of a reach school is absolutely horrible because it sets you up with a bad relationship with the school. I don't belong. That's what a reach school says. Again, on the other side, safety school. I'm too good for this school. Well, why would I want to go to a place where I don't match, whether it's too good or too low, if you will? So it's a real easy discussion when we look at these terms and we realize, my gosh, this is backwards. This one is setting my kid up for failure. This one is setting my kid up for failure because I don't fit in. I don't match the incoming cohort. So we want to do away with this concept. Let me briefly talk about Target. I didn't mention that one, but Target is the school where you should fit. Everything should fit. The problem is most kids have their eye on hoping to get into the reach school, and then they settle for their target school. Again, the process is backwards. We want to create a scenario where all of the schools that I'm applying to, I'm going to feel like I match for the incoming cohort, and I'm going to fit in because it's going to meet all of my emotional needs when I get there. When we do it that way, we're going to have a high degree of success of graduating with a positive ROI major. And that in turn is the outcome that we're looking for, right? There are a lot of experiences that we want kids to get, and I want kids to have fun. And we talk about this concept of Ken. When you go to college, you want to meet Ken. That's a pretty bad N, pardon me. And Ken is knowledge, experiences, and a network. So if I can go to college and I can get knowledge, because that's going to help me in my future, I can get experiences, because that's going to be the college experience. It's a lot of fun. If that's football games, if that's a small school, if that's international student, abroad programs, whatever that experience or experiences are, that's fantastic. It's this perfect little spot in life between 18 and 22. If you have the means, go do it. And then the other thing that you really want is a network. You want to graduate with a Rolodex, even though we don't use that term anymore, but these kids want to have a ton of names in their contact list from people of all walks of life and all types of jobs. That's what's going to help propel them, because they live in a different world than we do. Us growing up, we are what's known as a native analog. And a native analog is someone where the phone is an add-on and it's a distraction. Our kids are native digitals. They grew up with the phone in their hands. They've never known a life without a phone in their hands. And the easiest way to determine whether you're an analog or a digital is at sunset. Are you sitting there and admiring the sunset, or are you someone that's got your phone out, taking it and immediately posting, doing all kinds of filters and missing the sun going down? That's the difference between a native analog and a native digital. And these kids are wired differently. Their context of everything that they do in life is really different, and their network is also different. So again, the things that we want kids to have when they go to college: knowledge, experience, and a network. Now, from all this, we have to recognize that we've got to do something different to help these kids get there. And the way that that's going to be is to recognize that there are some really ugly stats. And one of the ugliest stats out there, and pardon me while I use my cheat sheet, one of the ugliest stats out there is that the public graduation rate at a public school is 33.33%. The four-year public school college graduation rate is 33.3%. The 6-year graduation rate at a public school is 57.6%. Oops. 57.6%. So this is public. So you send your kid to a public school nationally, the national average is going to be 1/3 of them will graduate in 4 years, and just under 60% will graduate in 6 years. It's a lot of money to be spending for not a great outcome. For private schools, the 4-year graduation rate is 52%. So a whole lot higher than 4-year, but at a private school, it's only half? That sounds pretty bad. And then the 6-year graduation rate is 65.4%. So those numbers don't inspire me. And those are some really ugly stats, but colleges bury those stats. They talk about acceptance rates, and they talk about all kinds of other things to lure you away from the horrible numbers that these are. So that this is why there's been this huge national debate as to whether college is actually worth the cost. And it is in certain circumstances. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But these numbers are not great. The other numbers that are not great is that the number of kids that actually end up going to school, this is public and private, and getting a degree is only 54% at 6 years. It's just not very promising. This is why we want to use data to influence our decision. You just don't want to go, oh, I'll just go to local college X, or hey, I know that school was okay for me, I'm just going to do that. Well, you might end up being one of those statistics that we want to try to avoid. So those are some of the why we need to learn some different rules. The other things that you need to realize is that the rankings that you see on websites are very misleading. First, who's creating the rankings? There's no national database or not database, pardon me, there's a national database. There's no national organization that says these are the rankings and this is what you should follow. Because some websites are going to do it based on grad rates and cost and the number of students per professor. How many classes are there that are under 30 versus over 300? Everyone has a different ranking. So when you look and someone says, oh, that's a highly rated college. Well, what did they use? Who were they using to determine that? So rankings are misleading. The second thing is somehow, some way, they've all convinced you that low acceptance rates equal a great school. But in reality, low acceptance rates don't equal a great school. And let's take UCLA, for example. Now, I'm not bashing UCLA, but I'm going to show you something that's going to make you realize that, maybe it's not what we thought. So to get into UCLA, you got about a 10% chance. They're going to take, and I'm just using round numbers here. I know that the numbers fluctuate every year, but we're just going to use some round numbers. They're going to be close enough. They're going to be approximately 100,000 students that apply to UCLA. They're going to let in about 10% of those kids, or about 10,000, and about half are going to show up. That's kind of the way that works. Is that perfect math? No, but that's going to be good enough for what we're doing right now. Berkeley, for example, 15%. Right, so it just goes to show you. So UCLA has, I think, the single highest number of applicants at all of its schools. Long Beach State, by the way, had something, or in San Diego State had, over 75 or 80,000 applicants. So they're accepting more kids, but because more people are applying, it's going to take and drive down that acceptance rate. Acceptance rate is a measurement of how effective the marketing department is, and it is not a measurement of how great the school is. How do I know? Well, if I got 10 more thousand people to apply to my school this year than I did last year, and I only let in the same number of kids, my acceptance rate's going to go down, but it's the same professors teaching the same class. Right? Curriculum hasn't changed. Professors, there's always going to be some turnover, but it's still the same. But all of a sudden, because I got a whole bunch more people to apply, because I showed up on 2 more ranking lists, and that drove my numbers way high, it's not necessarily equal a great school. What does equal a great school? Oh, that's up for debate. And again, I'm going to look at outcomes as being a big one, but other people are not concerned with outcomes. They're just looking at the number of people apply. If everyone's doing it, it must be good. I've never been that person. The other thing, too, is low acceptance rates does not equal a high ROI and a return on investment. So you go to a school, let's take Purdue, because that's where my son goes, and it's roughly 45. You travel out there, you spend some night in a hotel, you give them spending money, it's going to be $50,000. So it's $50,000 a year. They graduate in 4 years at Purdue. That's one of the reasons why we picked it. I spent $200,000 to get my son a degree. I'm hoping that whatever field he goes into, he's going to be able to make enough money that return on investment is going to pay off. Now, those return on investment numbers, as from Department of Education, those are not numbers I've made up. So I'll show you all of this stuff in a little bit. But just remember that the new rules are, just because I see it ranked high doesn't mean it's a good school. Just because it's got a low acceptance rate doesn't mean it's a good school. And just because it has a low acceptance rate doesn't give me a high ROI. Well, again, I'm going to beat up on UCLA here. Second thing, I want to be influenced by data, not driven by it. I want to use data as a tool, but I don't want to be a slave to it. And then the other question is, where can I find good data? So the first thing I want to do is I want to find my match. And when I find my match for schools, the things that I'm looking for most are going to be GPA. And I'm going to want a plus or minus a third of a grade point. So if I find a school and the average GPA is 3.5, then I can go down to essentially a 3.2 and I can go up to about a 3.8. And that's going to give me that range that this school is going to be a good match for me. Now, is that scientific? No. This is 36 years of just putting kids into schools and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so when I give kids this bit of a range, I seem to have the best outcome in terms of graduation, finding satisfaction, a high ROI degree. So that's one of the ways that we find our match. So look for the average GPA, take your kid's GPA, add a third of a point, subtract a third of a point, and get an approximate range. Now, can I find happiness at a school that's well below this? Of course you can. Can I find happiness at a school that's well above that? Of course you can. But I'm trying to find you a path to get something that's going to work the majority of the time. The second thing that I want to do is I want to look at my ACT or SAT scores. Now, there's a lot of noise about the ACT and how it's bad, and ACT and these tests are all kinds of horrible things and they do all this. I don't think the tests are that bad. I've made a career and written books on looking and studying the test and figuring out how to coach them and beat them effectively. And the way that the tests are now, you need to be able to read critically, you need to be able to understand grammar, and you need to reason mathematically. All three of those things are going to work, and that they're going to work for you in your life if you can do those. Some professions are going to require more of that and other professions are not. Some kids are going to do well on tests, some kids are not. What the test scores do is it helps separate kids. So even though I study tests and I'm really good at helping kids beat the test, I struggle when there's too much of a time pressure and there's too many problems. The ACT is a nemesis of mine. In the very first section, 75 questions in 45 minutes. I don't work that fast. Much slower learner. So the ACT is not going to be a good test. So if you were to take my ACT, that's not a good match for me. But my SAT score was okay. And so now maybe I'm going to fit into that category. I'm going to go into a cohort where there's a bunch of people like me. So if I have a 4.0, but I have 1100 SAT, which is just around above, a little bit above average, but the average SAT score is a 1450, or at UCLA it's a 1440, I may not fit in. Yes, I'm every bit as smart as those kids, and I may end up being so much smarter, but that cohort of kids is just driven differently. So I'm trying to figure out a way to help you find your perfect match, and I use test scores and GPA. So when I use a test score, I'm looking at the schools, 75th percentile. Don't look at the average score, look at the 75th percentile. And I want my test score to be plus or minus 10 percentage points to that 75th percentile. So if I have the 50th percentile score, the 40th percentile score, and that's 70, I may not be a good match. If I have a score that's so much higher than the incoming score, I may not be a good match. Again, can I find happiness at this school? If I'm too high or too low, of course you can. But we're looking for trying to find that good match most of the time. So all of this is helping you avoid a mismatch. I'm trying to get you into a cohort that's going to match what your child's needs are. The other concept that you can think about is that, wait a second, there's this theory called big fish, small pond effect. And that students that go into a school where they are down towards the bottom, right? They just, as I say, maybe negatively, weasel their way in. They just got in. They were the last kid let in. They're going to be very small fish in a big pond, and they may feel like they don't belong. More people have seemed to have found success when they're the little bit bigger fish in the smaller pond. And so I preach something called good, better, and best. Go to a good high school, go to a better college, and get the best grades possible, because that's going to allow you to get into a graduate school or put your high GPA on a resume when you go to submit it for a job. So good, better, best. That's the way that I would approach that. And when you do that, you tend to be a little bit more of a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And my goal for kids is to be in that 75th percentile. I want to be in this top area. I don't want to be down in the bottom 10. I want to be up in the top 75. And the reason why, I've always kind of believed that, but I never had the statistics till I read Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. And he lays out very clearly why those students tend to be more successful. Any questions at this point before we move on to step 3? Stephanie, I can't hear you. Maybe it's me. Hold on. You try again, Stephanie. Nope, I still can't hear you. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I can't hear you. Can you put it into the chat? I really don't know why. Let me see if I can find you over here. I should be able to hear you. It just says that you're not muted. Oh, you know what? Let me try one other thing. Hold on one second, please. I might have the wrong setting on speaker. Yeah, for whatever reason, Stephanie, I can't hear you. My system, for some reason, doesn't seem to be functioning. I don't want to kick everyone out, but if you put it into the chat, I will take a look at that. My apologies. I see you did put it in the chat. Okay, hold on. So Stephanie's question is, if there is a disconnect between SAT score and GPA, which should you use to gauge? Always GPA. Always use your GPA as the first and primary. There is an unfortunate thing called grade inflation, and that's very real. If you go to gradeinflation.net, you'll see that over the last several decades, everyone's magically gotten smarter and everyone has higher GPA. But one of the things that occurs with that you're just in this situation, this weird situation of, I need to be able to see my APs, my honors courses, all of that, and test scores do play a role, but they're not the most important thing. So if I'm going to have a mismatch, I'm going to err more towards my GPA. That answer your question? Okay. My apologies again. Why I can't hear you, I don't know. Any other questions? All right, we'll put this back over here. Okay, let's move on to the next concept, finding your fit. So one of the things that ends up happening is parents will just simply say, hey, I'm going to send my kid to the school I went to because it fit me perfectly. And I loved it, therefore you're going to love it. And it might work great. But it may not have the range of majors that you're interested in. Maybe you're more of a STEM kid and your kid's humanities. My dad was an engineer that worked on spy satellites, and I have a degree in classical rhetoric. Don't ask what that is, because I don't know if I could fully explain it. So you're in this, I couldn't go to the same place he went because it didn't fit me. So when we're trying to find a fit for students, we want to use a guideline of, how do I know what majors my kid is going to want? Is there a test that I can give them? And I always discourage people from taking a test, because the very first test I think I took showed that I should end up being some sort of Army sniper because I had a disconnect with reality. And then the second test said that I was, probably more fit for not working with people and being alone. And now I end up where I'm coaching and teaching kids on a daily basis. So I think the tests were wrong, but when I took the test the very first time, maybe circumstances in my life were such with my family or whatever that, I just had a clouded judgment. So I knew that as a major, I wasn't going to be a mathematician. I knew that I wasn't very good in science. That wasn't my thing. But I loved history. I loved foreign languages. I loved Steinbeck and Hemingway. So I was going to have a degree in humanities. So maybe what we do is, instead of trying to find the perfect major, you find a school that has a wide range of things that fit a child, that's going to be beneficial, right? And there are some nice charts, and I'll send you in the follow-up email that I send to everyone. ACT has something called the World of Major chart and World of Work chart. And both of those are really nice because it breaks things up into zones. So rather than trying to close your eyes and determine what a 17-year-old is going to want to do when they're 55, it's like closing your eyes and trying to hit a dartboard 20 yards away. Maybe we just need to know that, hey, the dartboard's in this direction or the dartboard's in this direction, and I can throw it and that's going to be success. And so that's maybe finding a zone. Humanities, math, science, do I like working with data? Do I like working with people? Do I like working with things? And maybe you approach your search for majors more in that way, as opposed to, I'm going to go into computer science with a minor in data analysis or data science. Fantastic, great. What do either one of those things mean? Right? And that's what people don't know. They don't have that power to look that far in the future. So it's very hard for them to do that. And that's why there's a lot of failure, because people are trying to be too precise. A golf analogy, when you're putting from far away, you're maybe not trying to sink the putt. You're just trying to get inside of a zone. And I find that if we just get inside the zone when we find a major area, we're going to have a lot more success. Location. So for those of you on the call that live in California, right, I'm a horrible artist, but California is just two rectangles kind of set on top of each other, and it's about 8 hours this way and about 8 hours that way. And everyone says, oh, I want to go to California. I want to go to school in California. I go, well, have you ever thought about, a school in Reno or a school in Arizona? No, I need to stay in state. Well, it might be faster to get to one of those schools than it is to get to this school. So don't do it based on a state. Don't let a boundary dictate. What I always tell people is that if you really are committed towards a West Coast or California school, then, go like that. That takes in a lot more schools rather than just this little rectangle that we can draw that's called California. People will then say, well, wait a second, Mike, it's more expensive to go out of state. No, not necessarily. If I had kids that got into UC wherever and Purdue, and the same UC program was a 5.5-year graduation rate, and the Purdue was a 4-year graduation rate, the money worked out almost exactly the same. And my son has a job, that he starts at day one of when he graduates, hopefully, or soon thereafter. And he's off earning a living, as opposed to, hey, Dad, I'm working at the bar late tonight. Turn the alarm off because I'm not going to be in. And he's 22 or 23. So location's a weird thing. That factors into money. People will say, I don't want my child to go too far away. And while I understand that, please recognize that your child, this is their turn to be the hero of their life. When they were growing up and they were little, you were the hero. And there's been this change where they're taking more responsibility and they're doing more things. And hopefully that they've had enough experiences that they're ready to go be the hero of their own life. And it's time for you to take your cape off and give it to them and say, go fly. And if that means that they got to go across the country in order to find the school that's the right match and the right fit, then maybe that's what ends up happening. It's hard getting from the Bay Area. It's hard to get to Purdue. It's a 12-hour trip. The moment we leave our house, we don't get there 12 hours later. We have friends where the kids go to San Diego, and it's a lovely school, and I would love the hour and 15-minute flight or whatever it is. That would be a whole lot better than what I got to do. But San Diego didn't fit my kid. Purdue did. So that's something to recognize, is that location isn't always what you think. What other people will say is, well, wait a second. The weather is so bad. I don't want them to go to UT Austin. I don't want them to go to Arizona. I don't want them to go to Purdue in Indiana. Well, think about this. Colleges know this. They have got the sweetest times of the year carved out for their semesters. So kids will show up end of August, September, October. Beautiful weather. That's fall, right, in a lot of places. Starts to get a little cold in November, December, yes, but you're gone halfway through December because they have finals and people go away for of the break, the semester break. Some schools go back beginning of January. Okay, January, February are going to be cold. Some other schools go back mid-January. But you're looking at 4 or 8 weeks of really inclement weather. And then all of a sudden you're into the springtime. And then you got April and May, beautiful time of year. So these kids, there's 52 weeks in a year. And if you go to a quarter school, that's only 30 weeks out of 52. So 3/5 of the time And out of that 3/5 of the time, the weather is really pretty good the majority of the time. So when people say, "Oh, we don't like the weather, we don't like the location," really think that. It's really rethink that. There's not that much time that you spend. The other thing too, I know, having my kid have to travel across country, I've watched him grow tremendously. He's able to navigate anything. He gets thrown curveballs with delays and Southwest doing this and Southwest doing that. And he's like, "Yep, no big deal." He's able to handle it. So I really think that that's been a great learning experience as well for us. Campus size and culture. There's something called the Carnegie classification, and it breaks schools into 4 categories. I like to just keep it a little bit simpler, and I just go small, medium, and large. And a small school is going to be a couple thousand kids. A medium school is going to be tap out around 15,000, and a large school is going to be 15,000 plus, all the way to 50, 60, 70,000 kids in some cases. You have to realize that there's a different experience at each one. When you go to a small school, you know a lot more people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you know them intimately. It just means, yeah, I see that guy, I see that girl, I see those people routinely. When you go to a large school, there's a lot more people. You're not necessarily going to see everyone, but you're probably still going to have the same amount of friends in a small or large school, because you're going to center these things around clubs, activities, sports, your dorm room, your major. So in terms of the friendships that people make, kids have been reporting to me for years that they have about 10 friends at a small school. They have about 10 friends at a large school. Of course, they got a lot more acquaintances, but these are people that they call friends. So I don't necessarily think when we talk about campus size, the amount of friendships is going to be a big deal. But I use a term called the baby shoe analogy. Is that when you were buying shoes for your son or daughter, you never bought them the size that fit today. You always bought them a little too big so that they had room to grow. And one of the things that ends up happening when kids do go to a smaller school, they sometimes feel as if they outgrow it. That's always something to keep in mind. Now, you go to a large school and you go, wow, that's too big. I understand that, but so are big cities, right? You may one day have to go into a big city, and if you grew up in a large campus, you learn to navigate that. Some campuses do a much better job, some large campuses, I should say, do a much better job of making you feel like it's a small school. And a lot of this has to do with the way the school is laid out. Arizona State, for example, great big school. And, I'm a big fan of Arizona State, but what Arizona State does is it's essentially 2 freeways just intersecting. And there's a great big hallway, and at lunch, or not hallway, a great big walkway. And at lunchtime, you got thousands of kids walking north-south and thousands of kids walking east-west. And that's just the way that they do it. And they don't make any bones about it. They're a big school. You take some other Midwestern schools that might be 30, 40, 50,000 people, but they have a lot of vanishing points. So as you start to walk, there's never more than a few hundred yards, and then all of a sudden they've got a building, and so you have to kind of walk around the building, and it gives this impression that it's a smaller school. So that's a campus size issue. A culture issue is when you walk on campus, how do you feel? Biggest mistake I made was I visited colleges on a weekend, because now I had no one telling me, and all I was doing was just taking a tour of buildings. I always recommend to students that when you visit a school, you visit it between the hours of 11 and 1. Most likely that's going to be a lunchtime. And you're going to get a sense of the campus culture and who it is. When my younger son, when we were visiting colleges, we went down to a smaller private school down in LA. Not going to mention it because it's not fair. But this was a school that he walked onto the campus and it was not lunchtime. We got there a little bit early and he goes, yeah, it's really nice. It's set up in the hills. It's beautiful. Buildings are cool. Oh, this is great. All of a sudden lunchtime hits and all these kids come out and they're all wearing black and they got purple hair and eyeshadow this and eyeshadow this. Again, nothing wrong with it. But my kid looks like he stepped out of an Abercrombie and Fitch catalog and he did not fit in. He knew right then and there this was not the case. That was my experience when I went to San Francisco State. I went and visited on a Saturday. Buildings looked nice. I grew up in South San Jose. I show up, I got white Converse, acid wash jeans, and a white sweater, and I show up at San Francisco State. Everyone's wearing black. Everyone's got long hair. I realized like the moment I stepped on campus, oh boy, I'm in trouble. So campus size is one thing, culture is another. There's all kinds of different things to look for when you're visiting schools. And that's something that you can't really control. That's something that your child has to go through and experience. That's the value of taking campus visits, right? So we talk about the campus visit. So what is the campus visit? It's how does it fit today? You walk on this campus and you go, oh, this is perfect for me. Okay, it's perfect for you today. Will it have the capacity to allow enough room for your growth? And the kids are going to grow dramatically over the 4 or 5 years that they go to college. So does it fit today, but how will it fit tomorrow? Most critical that you recognize that you allow room for growth. This is going to be in majors, because please realize 80% of the people that go to college change their major at least one time. So if you go to a school, I love Cal Poly. I know there's someone on the call that's got an older kid at Cal Poly. I love everything about Cal Poly except the concept of it's challenging to change a major. Very challenging. Possible, but very challenging. So what happens if I just played the odds and I said, well, there's an 80% chance that I'm going to change a major and it might be difficult to get into. How am I going to do that? That school, Cal Poly, may not be a good fit. And then, do you really see yourself there? So one of the easy ways to do this is when you go to a campus visit, make certain that you get on a tour. Some colleges will rank take a look at, not rank, but take a look at and rate you if you visited the college. It's an interest aspect. If you're interested in that college, did you go to local meetings? Did you visit the campus? Those things are tracked sometimes by schools. So when you're there, you have to really feel if I fit in. Will I be able to change majors? Will I be able to grow? What's the neighborhood like? Weather is, again, an issue, but maybe not the most important issue all the time. There's a number of things to look at there that I think we should always take into consideration. Any questions on I think I kind of blazed through finding your fit and the campus visit. Any questions that I can answer on either one of those steps? And again, for whatever reason, I still can't hear you. So you have to type this in. My apologies. Maybe not. Okay. All right. Paradox of choice. Again, just because you have a lot of choices doesn't make this a great option for you. So how many schools should you apply to? What's exploratory studies? And undecided. So the most important thing to recognize is that this has changed a tremendous amount since you were of the age to go to college. Whether you went to college or not, whether you went in this country or not, doesn't make any difference. That in the 20 years, 15, 20, 25, 30 years since you were at college, the situation has changed. When I started 36 years ago, the formula was 3, 2, 1. I'm going to apply to 3 schools. I'm going to get into 2 of them, and I'm going to go to one of them. That was my rule. It was easier back then. This is 3 decades ago. Then I had to change. Then I had to say, okay, it's going to be 6, 3, 1. And then it was 9, 4, 1. And now, unfortunately, it's probably 15, 6, and 1. And that's kind of what we're hoping for. And we do this, we break this up, is that 15 is definitely, if I'm applying to 8 CSUs or 8 UCs, I'm not, that's 16 schools. I'm counting those as 2, right? One system, and then I'm going to apply to a bunch of other ones. There are going to be people that say, Mike, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. You should never apply to that many. And I would say you're right. Unfortunately, the game has changed, and I've had to adapt with that, because when I was telling people only apply to 9, they weren't getting into very many schools anymore, and so we had to up that number. Have to realize that so much of this has now become a numbers game. At UCLA, 100,000 applicants, they let 10,000 people in, but your kid had a 4.0. They took 10 plus AP classes. They have everything that you could possibly want. How did they not get in to UCLA? Well, you missed out on the lottery pick. They're going to take, and they're not going to be able to let everyone in that should be able to get in. Just that's hard plain fact. So we have to up this number up. The other thing that we do, the reason why we bump this number up just a bit, is that I want kids to apply to 2 or 3 rolling admission schools. So a rolling admission school means that you're going to find out anywhere from a couple weeks to 6 weeks whether you get into the school. And that is a tremendous gift that I give to you, give that one to you for free. It really changes your relationship with your child, because when you're waiting every single day for the email to come in, whether you get into the school or not, it can be very frustrating. And when the rejections start coming in, it's really hard. But if we know there were a couple schools that match and fit me, but their process is they're just going to let kids in early, boy, that takes so much stress off. And then it's like, I always joke, I go, see, someone does love you, right? You're going to go someplace. And it really is, it's the single biggest change that when rolling admissions came along, that really helped things out a great deal, because now we could take a lot of the stress off and go through. So that's the number of schools I applied to. 15 is a very round number. I had kids last year that applied to 11 or 12, but they had a number of UCs and CSUs, so we felt comfortable with that. I had one kid that was trying to do 20, and we had to say, listen, that's just ridiculous. That's too many numbers, and we had to scale it back. So, right, think about 10 plus is going to be a good number, and if your kid's going to go around 15, make certain that those last couple are worthwhile. Don't just throw, I'm just going to try Stanford just because I want to. That doesn't count as one. These are real, honest attempts. These are schools that match me and match my data and fit my needs. So that's how we would go about how many schools to apply to. What's the major you should go into? I'm a huge fan of kids going in not knowing what they want to be when they grow up. I changed my major 3 times. Most people I know changed at least once. There's occasionally you get a person that says, nope, I knew I was always going to be an engineer. Been an engineer since birth, always going to be an engineer till I die. That's great, but not everyone's like that. Some of us have to go through. I'm closer to retirement than anything else now, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So with that, you got to think, gosh, how is a 17, 18-year-old kid going to know what biomedical engineering is? It's the real hot major down at UC San Diego. And I have so many kids that say, oh yeah, I'm going to go into biomedical. I go, oh my gosh, that is so cool. What is it? And then they can't tell me. So, because there are no biomedical engineering classes in high school, right? So I really am a big fan of campuses that allow you to go into the College of Engineering, the College of Science, the College of Humanities or business or whatever. And then after a year or two, you then can go find your major. I think that's the very best way. University of Washington does that. Again, using Purdue just because I've got firsthand experience. The engineering program, everyone is a first-year engineer, and then you apply to civil, mechanical, aeronautical, environmental, right? And people go, wait a minute, that makes me nervous, because what if I can't get into mechanical engineering? Well, you know what? They're doing you a favor. Because what if you got into mechanical engineering at the very beginning and you realize that you don't match, that you couldn't keep up, that those kids were on a whole other level, and that engineering's not really a good thing for you? Well, now you're kind of trapped. And colleges like Washington, University of Washington, Purdue, there's countless others that do this, that you apply to a whole college or program, and then you're allowed to pick. They're helping sort you out so that you're going to have a higher degree of success and outcome, right? Again, what's the outcome going to be? Just because you graduated from a college with a mechanical engineering degree doesn't mean that you're a good mechanical engineer, and you may not want to do that. So these programs that allow you to go and apply that way, I think, are fantastic. And exploratory studies is a newer version of undecided. So undecided isn't bad, but undecided doesn't, colleges are not helping you find your major. They're just expecting you to kind of bounce around until you find something. And that's what the old general education approach used to be. Hey, we're going to take a couple English and history and speech and and science classes, and you're going to help find something that you're interested in. So undecided is not bad, and I'm a big fan of that because, again, the numbers say that only 20% of the kids are going to keep their major. But exploratory studies takes and one-ups that. What exploratory studies does is say, listen, I've got a 1 to 4 semester program that's going to help push you to find a degree that really matches what you want. It's going to fit your needs. Not all schools have exploratory studies, but it is a program that's growing. And so if you have a child that's very confused and is uncertain with what they want, try to look for exploratory studies programs, because they're taking the mission on of saying, we get it. You want to go to college, you want to do well, but you just don't know what it is that you want to do. Let me help out with that. All right, let's go back here. What questions do you have? Anything that I can help you out with and make sense of? Something that I glossed over, I forgot to include. I said something, I was going to say it, and then I started talking and forgot. And again, my apologies, you've got to type that in if there's a question. All right, so we're going to go ahead here, applications and essays. So in the United States, there's something known as the Common Application. And the Common Application is an approach. It's an organization that's got hundreds and hundreds of schools. I might be close to 1,000. I can't remember exactly how many, what the number is, but it's a common form. It's going to have all your data, going to have a place for you to put in, your grades and classes and all of that. And then it's going to give you 7 essay prompts. And out of the 7 essay prompts, you have to write one 650-word essay. And those tend to be very challenging for kids because they're a personal essay. Kids tend to write okay when they have to, talk about the Civil War or something in science. They're able to write about that because they can research it and they don't have to look inside themselves. These personal essays, when done correctly, are pretty challenging because you've got to talk about yourself in a way that doesn't make you sound egotistical, or it doesn't make you sound like you're a defeatist, like, oh, I'm never going to be any good. You need to show a high level of emotional intelligence, right? And we talk about, when I teach essay writing for this, we talk about the 5 different types of emotional intelligence that you want to at least exhibit a couple of these. There's no specific format on how to write a common application essay, but there are some ways that work better than others. And out of the 7 prompts, the very first 3, the hero's journey framework works fantastic. So if you're not familiar with hero's journey, you watch Star Wars, Harry Potter, it's escaping me now, but there's countless number of movies and books that are based off of a hero that starts in the ordinary world, meets a struggle, bounces around the bottom, doubts him or herself, and then goes back up and is successful at the end. Buzz Lightyear, Toy Story is also a hero's journey, right? And I even think I wrote an article about using Toy Story for this, maybe in a video. But Buzz Lightyear in his ordinary world is taken out of his ordinary world, thinks he's something special, he can fly. Then all of a sudden he's met with this realization that he is just like everyone else, just a toy. He can't fly. And at the very end, I hope I'm not spoiling it for anyone, he and Woody go up on a rocket, and then he's flying, and Woody says, "Oh, you're flying." He goes, "No, I'm falling with style." Right? That's the ultimate hero's journey process. Ordinary world, struggle, doubt yourself, have success, and see what you've learned. So Common App essays are great for the hero's journey. You can read about that. I write about it on Twitter all the time, or anything on my website. I'll give you links to that later. The downside to the Common Application is that colleges said, hey, wait a second, I'm not happy with your one 650-word essay. I want something else known as a supplemental essay. And so some schools don't want anything. The 650-word essay is great. Some schools, you know what, just give me one little bit more, two other short essays. And some schools want a ton of information. So that's always challenging, and that's the downside with the Common Application. The UC and CSU system, well, let's get through the CSU system first. That's California State University, Cal Poly, San Diego State, or San Jose State, Sonoma State, right? All of those CSUs. No essay, no test scores. Put your name on it, put your grades, send in your money, you're good to go. And you think that the lottery is an easy ticket. Long Beach State, San Diego State, 70, 80,000 applicants. How are we separating kids out from all of these other kids? They're not. They're just saying, this is my group of students here. These kids that are too high, they're probably not going to come here, so I'm not going to waste an acceptance. These kids that are too low, I'm sorry you didn't do enough. I got 25,000 kids here that I'm going to accept, and I hope roughly 12 or 13,000 show up. That's the CSU application. You can be done in less than an hour, and then you just, fingers crossed, hope that you get in. The UC, a little bit more complicated. There's 10 UC, oh, by the way, CSU campuses, there's 23 of them, probably only about 5 that I'd recommend. For most subjects, there are some that are specialty that are not so bad in other ways. The UC, there are 10 campuses. UC San Francisco is graduate school only, so there are only 9 UC campuses that you attend as an undergraduate. So it's a, application, put all the information, put your grades, some other information, and then we talk about the 4 UC essays of a couple hundred words each. They give you 8 prompts, and then you're expected to write on 4. And it's hard. The 4 are going to, there's going to be some redundancy. And so the UC is checking for a couple of things. Can you write enough with enough variance? And that's variance in terms of topic and also in terms of style. Does your essay follow the exact same 5-paragraph essay format? Well, over 4 essays, that's going to get pretty boring. And they're going to look and say, well, I like this kid's a little bit better because they had a couple different topics that they wrote about. It wasn't just about themselves and how they won the big game. And they also changed the rhythm of the writing. They changed the approach. They came out with something what I call cold open. Watch any Star Wars, it's always a cold open. They just jump you right into the scene and you don't know anything about it, and then they go build the context. So, the UC application of 4 essays and that redundancy is built in on purpose. It's checking and challenging you. That can be really difficult for you. And then there's another one that's not as popular called the Coalition app. But generally, we can find almost every university in the US is either going to be Common App, UC, CSU, or some schools have their own individual app. But if it's their own individual app, it almost always can be taken with a Common App or Coalition. So that's the case. Applications are pretty easy to do. It's the essays that get difficult. And you want to watch a teenager struggle to get things done, tell them they got to write their application essay. However, ChatGPT is a great thing. Now, before you go, oh my God, I'm not going to let my kid write their essay with ChatGPT, that's cheating. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ideation and helping in a question and answer format using ChatGPT to help you do that. And this is something I teach in my college planning classes, that it used to take weeks and almost a month to get a first draft out of a kid. And now within 20 minutes, I write a significantly long prompt. I get the kids that, and I now have ChatGPT is functioning almost like a psychologist. Tell me about what was happening in your life. Why was that hard? How was this going? And it's asking questions, and then it's helping create an outline. And we did this in my class last night. Literally within 10 minutes, almost every kid in the class had an outline that they could use to then start writing. So that's not cheating. I'm not asking ChatGPT to write. I'm not having the kids tell it to write. I'm having ChatGPT help it organize its thoughts and get thoughts out onto paper, as it were. So questions on application essay. I see someone wants to know which CSUs are not, are not commuter schools. So which CSUs are not commuter schools? You can Google this. I apologize. I haven't Googled it in a few years, so I don't know the number off the top of my head. But there's a common number where people say any school that has more than or less than, say, 10% of the population live on campus, it's considered a commuter school. Again, someone has made these classifications. Everyone kind of bought into it. Cal Poly's not a commuter school. San Diego State, because they force all freshmen and sophomore to live on campus, is not a commuter school. San Jose State is the easiest way to go. I was visiting my uncle. He lives in Fullerton, right near Disneyland. And I took my son and we go, hey, let's go check out CSU Fullerton, which was down the street from his house. And when we got there, the entire campus, I shouldn't say the majority of the campus from the entrance that got to was essentially all gigantic parking structures. So when all you see at the main entrance of the university are parking structure, pretty good chance it's a commuter school. So I would think that a school like Chico is not a commuter school based on where it is. But there are a lot of people I know that don't live on campus. So it's a weird way to look at schools. Is it commuter? Is it not? What I would look at more would be when you got onto campus, what's that culture? And like I said, the thing I like about San Diego State, it's very tough, but they force you to 2 years to live on campus. All freshmen and sophomore have to live on campus unless you have a waiver for some reason. So that's a good thing, right? They're trying to build a culture. I like that. Cal Poly, based on the way it's set up, is that way. San Jose State, even though they've done a really nice job of making that campus, they've blocked off certain streets and they've kind of not walled it in, but just made it where it feels like it's more of a campus. It's still a commuter school. So there are fewer schools that I would say are not CSUs, and chances are out of the 23, the majority are. I don't know if that properly answers your question, Stephanie, but that's the way that I would look at that. Any other questions on this? Okay, let's talk about some free resources here. So this is a link, and I'll in the email that you'll get tomorrow, it's an automatically driven email. It's going to send you these links, and one is to the College Board, and this is a website called Big Future. So they're going to help you identify colleges based on location, majors, the type of school, and the campus life. And they give you some great data on this, right? So if let's say that we just want to go through and I want to pick Arizona, California, Colorado, and let's say Nevada, just because it's close by. We're going to go West Coast, so we're going to go Oregon and Washington. So then I'm going to hit continue. So I would click on that, and it would say that there's 482 colleges in the West Coast that I could look at. I go, oh gosh, that's so many. Let's see what type of school it is. Well, I want it to be a 4-year school. I don't care if it's public or private, and I'm not going to worry about too much of many of these other aspects. They've proven not to be very good in terms of sorting. So I'm going to sort colleges. Okay, now I'm down to 203. I'm now going to go to campus life, and this is this Carnegie classification where there's 4, less than 3,000, 3,000 and approximately 9,000, 9,000 to 15,000, and more than 15,000 schools. So what I always recommend to people is you pick the middle two no matter what, and then you err to the smaller school or you err to the bigger school. The reason I say that is that, maybe that there's a great college that's 14,998 or it's 15,001, and if you don't click on this one box or this box, you're going to miss out on it. So it's better to have at this initial stage one too many categories than one too few. Next thing you'd want to look at is the urban setting or suburban or rural. And what I would say is that you kind of pick the middle, and then you would err either towards one side or you don't care, right? So let's do this. We go down to show colleges, and now we're down to 39 colleges. Oh, that's a pretty good number to start searching for. So College Board is a great way to get into some initial searching. And please realize that just because that you came up with a list of schools does not mean that your list is not going to grow and shrink each week. You're going to go and visit, campuses. You're going to have friends that went to, and I was a rep at school that talked about the college, and you they told you all about it and you go, oh my gosh, that sounds great, and I add that to my list. And then when you're searching, you find 2 or 3 other schools that are on the list. So the list is always going to change, but the College Board is a great way to search to get some general information. Once you get a specific school that you go, hey, this sounds pretty interesting. Sorry, I'm struggling here. You're then going to type in something called common data set, and then any university that you want. So type in common data set, oops, and then you're just going to insert the college name. So let's take common data set San Diego State. And what you're going to do is you're going to look for the PDF. And this common data set is 39 pages. There's more data on here than you're ever going to want to have. But we don't need all 39 pages. What we really need is sections C6 and C7. Now, you'll get lost in all the other data at some point, but your initial point of contact here is going to be to scroll down and go to sections C6 and C7, because this is the basis for selection. And so what they're telling you is that San Diego State, remember when I told you about the CSUs being enter your grades and tell me the classes, right? That's all they look at. San Diego State is telling you what they think is very important is the rigor of secondary school record, those are the classes that you took, and your academic GPA. Your class rank is not considered, your standardized test scores are not considered, your application essay is not considered. They're not looking at recommendations. They will look at some extracurricular activities, that's going to be considered. Where you live is going to be considered, and that's because that they're going to give you a point if you live in the county that the school lives in, and they're going to deduct a point, or not give you a point, I suppose, if you don't live in that county. And then state resident, they're going to give you preferential treatment for the state. So they say. I think that number's really gotten skewed over the years, where they're letting out-of-state kids in because they're paying more money. So if you want to figure out what it takes to get into San Diego State, you better have hard classes and good grades, because that's what they're telling you, that's what they want. Let's take a look at common data set UT Austin. So I had a dad come into my office and he was telling me, well, of course, every school is going to want to look at grades and test scores. How silly of you to think that they wouldn't want that. And I go, okay. And we pulled up the UT Austin website, and we go to C6 and C7, basis for selection, and look at what UT Austin does. UT Austin says, I'm going to consider your rigor of academic record and your class rank and your GPA and your test scores and your application essay and your recommendations and your extracurricular activities and your interview, and they're going to look at everything. So if you're a kid that has a more balanced resume, as opposed to a kid that just was 100% gung-ho on grades and test scores, not that there's anything wrong with that, that everyone's wired differently. This is why we need to allow data to influence our decisions and fit our emotional needs. That's why reach, target, and safety is a totally bogus, backwards way of looking at things, and it doesn't work anymore. We now have data here that says, gosh, I maybe didn't have great test scores, but I had great grades and I had all these other good things. Or, you know what, that sophomore year really killed me, but my gosh, I was great on everything else. And maybe a school like UT Austin will consider. Well, how are you going to get into some of these schools that only look at grades and test scores if you don't have those two things, or rigor of curriculum? So I really like this approach, because they're going to say, I'm going to consider you and see what sort of student you are. The hard part is, how do I know this? Well, this is what I do for a living, and I teach classes, and I'm supposed to know these things. It's going to take a lot more work for you to go find all this stuff. That's the downside. But the information is out there. Okay. The next one, what happened to my, I don't know what happened to that one. The next website I'd recommend is niche or niche.com. Depends on which dictionary you look up, which way to pronounce it. Niche.com is the Yelp of college reviews. So College Board is the one that just gives you pure data, but Niche is going to give you user experience. So if we were to take a school, let's type in San Diego State, just because we were there earlier, and we take a school like San Diego State, they're going to give you rankings based off of the users. So if we look right here, there were 5,289 reviews, right? Those are the Yelp reviews. These are kids that filled out a niche review, and overall they said, hey, the school is an A-. It's got B+ academics, A+ diversity, A athletics, A- in value, A campus, and A+ party scene, what every kid and parent wants to know. B- in professors, C+ in dorms, and a lot of that's that sophomore year. I know that gets on a lot of kids. A+ student life, location, campus, safety, right? I wouldn't look at niche for really too much else, because it's going to say, hey, this was the number 4 or number 18 top party school out of 1,525 schools. It's number 18. Well, let me break it to you. There's a party on every campus and every university every night of the year. It's just whether your child chooses to go to it. So I don't really take a look and view rankings too much on anything. You know, some of these numbers are good, but there's a better place. The College Board has better updated numbers. So I'm always looking at the College Board for numbers. Linda, I think that's going to be your question, if I understand correctly, that the College Board is where I get my facts, and I try and get a sense of the school to see if it's going to fit me by using niche. And then I go to, and I really don't know what happened to this, then I go to my website, ingeniuslearning.com, and I go to, is college worth the cost? And there's a formula here that you can read, 5, 10, 20. This is all free. And you can type in any major university in the US. Let's get off of San Diego. Let's try UCLA. So we can type in any university in the US, type that in, and it's going to have all of the majors, right? The big section. It's not going to have every kind of small variance. It's going to have the major areas. I don't know what else to call it. And on this, you're going to be able to sort. So if you just click up here, it's going to go alphabetical. If you click here, you're going to see what the graduate rate. Remember, we started way back at the very beginning talking about how poor grad rates. Look, UCLA's got an awesome 5-year grad rate at 89%. I, as a college planner or future planner, am not going to recommend you go to a school that the 5-year grad rate is less than 70% unless it's got a great reason why. And then I'm going to tell you what age the ROI turns positive. I'm going to tell you what your estimated yearly earnings after 20 years are. These are not numbers I made up. This all comes from Department of Education data. And then I'm going to tell you what your lifetime return on investment is. So the really nice thing is, because these are all sortable, let's just go over here and click on lifetime return on investment. So if you go to UCLA and you graduate with a degree in Computer and Information Sciences, CIS, after estimated yearly earnings going to be 211. This is an average. I know this is Silicon Valley, so this is weird, but this is the US average. And your lifetime return on investment is going to be 2.8 million. Pretty good. Good ROI. If I get a degree in computer engineering, my lifetime return on investments is 2.6. But then we take a big drop, and we see that it's almost $1 million difference for the next major, which is going to be nursing, at 1.7. So let's do this real quick. Let's say, okay, that's kind of interesting. Nursing, UCLA, I wonder if that's an awesome nursing college for an ROI. Well, on this chart, you can also search not only by campus, but you can search by major. So let's go to nursing. And let's go to lifetime return on investment. Remember, outcomes is what we're searching for now. Outcomes is not the only driver. It is one factor in all of the college searching. So Unitech College, which is a nursing college in Fremont, you know, you're going to stand to do the very best at 2.6 million for an ROI. Cal State East Bay, 2.4. Cal State Sacramento, 2.3. Sonoma State, 2.2. San Francisco State, 2.2. Stanislaus, 2.1. Look at the CSUs dominate the nursing. You get University of Providence, Mercy, Dominguez Hills, Chico, right? Chico was, back in the day, was the party school. My gosh, now you got 1.9. What was UCLA again? 1.7. So if you're looking at just pure numbers, Chico is going to rank higher in nursing than UCLA. And someone says, well, I'm not going to send my kid. If my kid could get in UCLA, they're not going to do that. Okay, right? This was a kind of an apple, almost like an apples for apples comparison. What if we took and said, well, construction management. My kid's interested in construction management. The number one program in the nation for ROI, Chico, at 2.4 million. So this is why we allow data to influence decisions but not make them for us, because that may not be the right fit. Let's go back to UCLA for a second, because I said earlier I was going to pick on that. So UCLA has 54 majors. There's 25 majors per page. Down here, we can click through, find, there we go. And we can see that that's all 54, 25 on page 1, 25 on page 2, and 4 here. Well, look at here. The ROI at the very bottom for UCLA is not so good. Okay, the worst is dance. Second worst is going to be music. Here's my degree, Class in Ancient Studies, minus 273,000. Now you know why I own my own business, because no one would hire me with that degree. But physiology, minus 246. Okay, well, that's just got to be outliers. Nope, hold on. I want to be a geologist. I'm going to make minus 111. I'm going to go into architecture, minus 102. I'm going to be a history teacher. Sure, okay, we all see that's a tough one, minus 66. Area studies, which I really don't know what that means. Psychology, biology is not even positive. Dance, theater, self, romance, all of these majors, we have to go number 26 out of 54 is 367,000. To live in the Bay Area, sometimes that's just one person's average salary. So when someone says, oh, I'm going to UCLA, and you go, wow, that must be so prestigious. And you know what? In some degrees it is, but in some degrees it isn't. So this is why we have to allow data to take and influence your decision. And that's why we look at ROIs for outcome. So that's a free resource that you can get lost on searching. And then the other one here is I call them guidebooks. And, there's all kinds of categories over here that you can search. But it's how to balance grades and test scores, which college is right for you, how to do a college visit. I get all kinds of guidebooks and I add to them on a regular basis. It's all free, so you got that going for you. Anyway, that's that.